Yo, what's up YouTube? Welcome to Tricky Jim. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new here, my name's Andrew Mahone. I'm a world-class Pokemon trading card game player and regional champion. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing my top 5 decks for the Pokemon trading card game Pocket. I've been playing this game since the soft launch in New Zealand over a month ago, and I've had plenty of time to refine my decks and really figure out which strategies I think are at the top of the list as far as competitive decks in this game. So, if that sounds interesting to you, and if you like Pokemon cards, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That would do wonders for my mental health. As I go through my top decks, I'm not going to be ranking them in any specific order from best to worst. I think all 5 of these decks are very competitive decks that I would consider playing for a tournament in Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket, and decks that I definitely think that you could play to grind out wins on the ladder. With that being said, I definitely got to start things off with Pikachu EX. Pikachu EX has been by far the most popular deck in the online tournament scene for Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket. And if you're unfamiliar with the online tournament scene, well, you definitely got to check out play.limitlesstcg.com. Limitless TCG is a website that many trading card game communities use to run tournaments and organize events. If you're interested in tournament results, definitely cannot recommend Limitless TCG enough. Pikachu has been all over the place as far as online tournament results go, and that's because it's a low to the ground, consistent, hard-hitting deck. And Pikachu EX is the star of the show with its Circle Circuit attack, which does 30 damage for each of your bench lightning Pokemon. So if you have 3 lightning Pokemon on your bench, Pikachu EX can do 90 damage for just 2 lightning energy as early as the second turn of the game. There's been a lot of discussion about which partners are best for Pikachu EX, and my favorites are Zapdos EX and Raichu. Zapdos EX, while kind of a weird, high-cost attacker, is just a big, basic Pokemon with a single retreat cost, which is one of the reasons that I really love Zapdos EX in this deck. It's just a Pokemon you don't mind having on the bench, it's not easy to knock out, and when you do eventually want to pivot to your Pikachu EX to start swinging with Circle Circuit, it only takes 1x speed to be able to pivot into Pikachu EX. Raichu is a great finisher for this deck since its Thunderbolt attack does 140 damage, and specifically, Raichu is really good in the mirror match since it allows you to one-hit KO both Zapdos EX and Pikachu EX. Thunderbolt does cost 3 lightning energy to use, and you have to discard all energy attached to Raichu in order to use the attack. But if you're winning the game, who cares? And getting those 3 energy onto Raichu is not so bad with the supporter card Lieutenant Surge. Lieutenant Surge allows you to move all lightning energy from your bench Pokemon to your Raichu, Electrode, or Electabuzz in the active spot. So throughout the game, you can stow energy on your Pikachu EX and Zapdos EX to prepare for a huge game-winning Thunderbolt with Raichu. Pikachu EX is definitely the most popular deck in the early TCG Pocket meta, so my next deck is a deck that has a pretty good Pikachu matchup and is also very popular for that reason. Mewtwo EX with Gardevoir. Mewtwo EX is huge in comparison to Pikachu EX with 150 base HP and the Side Drive attack, which does 150 damage. You do have to discard 2 Psychic energy from Mewtwo in order to use the attack, and the attack costs 2 Psychic and 2 colorless energy. So the most difficult part about playing Mewtwo EX is powering it up, but that's why you partner Mewtwo EX with Gardevoir. Gardevoir has the Psy Shadow ability, which allows you to attach an extra Psychic energy from your energy zone to your active Psychic Pokemon once during your turn. So with 1 Gardevoir set up and 2 energy on your Mewtwo EX, you can stream back-to-back Side Drive attacks and take huge knockouts. The key to a great Mewtwo Gardevoir list is to play no other basics other than Mewtwo EX and Ralts. This is going to streamline your deck and just make it as consistent as possible. Ironically, playing a card like Meowth with its Payday attack actually decreases the overall consistency of your deck, since you might start it or find it off of Pokeball when you would rather find Ralts or Mewtwo EX instead. I prefer to play 2 copies of Fossils rather than any other basic Pokemon. Pokemon to sort of artificially buff your basic count and make it more difficult for your opponent to use Sabrina to target down what they want to on your bench. I've got an entire video dedicated to explaining why fossils are great in your TCG Pocket deck, and I'll drop that link in the description below. Rounding out the rest of the list, I really like 2 copies of Giovanni alongside Mewtwo EX, since it allows you to use Psychic Sphere for 60 damage, which takes key knockouts against opposing Ralts, Charmander, Pikachu, and little guys like that. Mewtwo EX might seem pretty big compared to Pikachu EX, but standing next to the Stage 2 Charizard EX, neither of these Pokemon stand a chance. Charizard EX is the biggest, baddest attacker in Genetic Apex, and it's not particularly close. It's got 180 hit points and the Crimson Storm attack, which does 200 damage for 2 fire and 2 colorless energy. Like Mewtwo EX, you have to discard 2 fire energy from your Charizard EX in order to use this attack. Like with Mewtwo EX, Charizard EX has a very expensive attack, so you're going to need a way to power it up. Mewtwo EX has Gardevoir, and Charizard EX has Moltres with the Inferno Dance attack, which allows you to flip 3 coins and take an amount of fire energy from your energy zone equal to the number of heads and attach it to your bench fire Pokemon in any way you like. You want to open Moltres EX every game so that you can start using Inferno Dance as soon as possible. So just like the Mewtwo deck, it's best to limit your basic Pokemon to just Charmander and Moltres. To help protect your Charmander and Charmeleon from Sabrina, I also recommend playing 2 copies of Fossils in this deck so that you can send them up if your opponent tries to target them down. Potion goes a long way in this deck since you're going to want that Moltres EX to survive as long as possible while you build up your Charizard EX and accelerate energy onto your bench fire Pokemon. I've also found that while Sabrina isn't necessarily a card that you need to hold on to and play to take the game-winning knockout, since Charizard one-hit KOs everything with Crimson Storm, Sabrina is a great add in this deck since it allows you to sometimes slow your opponent down a turn if they don't have the necessary X speed in their hand to retreat one of their bench Pokemon. While we're on the topic of fire decks, my 4th pick is the Blaine's Ninetales and Rapidash deck. This deck is a ton of fun to play and super budget friendly. It doesn't have any Pokemon EX in it, and yet it can keep up with all of the best decks in Pokemon TCG Pocket. The idea of this deck is to fire off cheap attacks with Rapidash and Ninetales while boosting the damage that you deal with Blaine and Giovanni. Rapidash has 100 HP, and its fire main attack does 40 damage for just 1 fire energy. With Blaine, you're dealing 70 damage for just 1 fire energy, which one-hit KOs all evolving basics like Ralts, Charmander, Meowth, and so on. For big damage, Ninetales has the Flamethrower attack, which does 90 damage for 2 fire energy, and you have to discard a fire energy attached to Ninetales. With Blaine, you're dealing 120 damage for just 2 fire energy, which conveniently one-hit KOs Pikachu EX. So I do really like this Blaine's Ninetales and Rapidash deck into a Pikachu EX heavy metagame. Something super underrated about this deck is the effectiveness of Vulpix and its Tail Whip attack. For just 1 colorless energy, you get to flip a coin. If heads, the defending Pokemon can't attack during your opponent's next turn. It can really help you to buy turns in the early game while you build up big attacks with your Ninetales. The last deck that I've got for you is probably my favorite of them all, but it does struggle with the fact that Pikachu EX is everywhere right now because of its lightning weakness. And I'm talking, of course, about Articuno EX with Starmie EX. You may have seen some lists running around with just Articuno EX in them. Those lists are garbage. You absolutely want to be playing Starmie EX alongside Articuno. Starmie EX is actually the premier attacker in this deck. It's got 130 HP and the Hydro Splash attack, which does 90 damage for 2 water energy. As we talked about earlier with Pikachu EX, dealing 90 damage on the second turn of the game is incredibly strong and puts a ton of pressure on most decks, and a lot of decks will just fall apart if you do 90 damage on the second turn of the game. Starmie EX also has free retreat, which is a huge asset for this deck since Starmie EX can soak a hit and you can easily pivot into one of your other attackers. Something else that Starmie and Articuno have that Pikachu doesn't have is access to Misty. And I think that Misty is one of the strongest supporters in Genetic Apex. Misty is a supporter that allows you to choose one of your water Pokemon and flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, you take a water energy from your energy zone and attach it to that Pokemon. Now, the solo Articuno decks are pretty much trying to high roll with Misty in order to have some semblance of a game plan. But with Starmie EX in the deck, you can actually win games without hitting any heads on Misty. And all you really need in order to come back in a game where you're behind is to flip one heads on Misty. Misty is a supporter card that allows you to break one of the most fundamental rules of the Pokemon trading card game Pocket, that you can only attach one energy per turn. And it's on a supporter card, so you don't have to set up any Pokemon or have any specific Pokemon in the active spot in order to get that extra energy attachment. The downside is that it fails 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, you get to break that rule of the game and attach an extra energy to one of your water Pokemon. And with a card like Starmie, one extra energy is all you need, since Starmie's Hydro Splash costs 2 water energy. Now, if you happen to flip a bunch of heads, Articuno EX is a great attacker as well. It's got the Blizzard attack, which does 80 damage plus 10 damage to each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. That 10 damage spread to all of your opponent's benched Pokemon can make a huge difference with this deck, allowing Starmie to hit numbers that it otherwise wouldn't, especially in combination with Giovanni. I've capped off the list with 2 copies of Potion, which can disrupt the opponent's math and make it so that Articuno and Starmie are 3-hit KO'd instead of 2-hit KO'd, which can make the difference between a win and a loss in a game on TCG Pocket. That wraps it up for my top 5 decks from Genetic Apex, but remember, the rankings can always change. Maybe there's a deck in the 6 to 8 range, which eventually sneaks up and becomes one of my favorites in the weeks ahead. I play a lot of TCG Pocket and the Pokemon trading card game every weekday on stream, so if you haven't already, definitely make sure to check out my Twitch streams, twitch.tv/TrickyJim. I also upload all of my stream VODs in their entirety right here on YouTube on the Tricky Jim VODs YouTube channel. If you liked this breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as I'm going to be creating a lot more Pocket content from the perspective of a competitive Pokemon TCG player in the weeks and months ahead. Thanks again for watching. Y'all have a good one. See ya.